Speck shot and killed his wife, Caitlin Conrad Speck, while she was asleep and then killed their dog. According to the prosecution, after the shooting, Speck inflicted superficial wounds on himself to support a false claim that home invaders had attacked the family.
In the early morning hours of June 5th, 2020, a quiet neighborhood in Hanahan, South Carolina, was suddenly shaken by a chilling emergency call. At around 5 a.m., a man named Matthew Speck dialed 911. His voice sounded panicked and weak. He told the dispatcher that two intruders had broken into his home in the Eagle Landing neighborhood while he and his wife were asleep. According to Matthew, the attackers had shot his wife and injured him before fleeing the house. Police officers rushed to the address while the sky was still dark. When they arrived, something immediately caught their attention. The house showed no signs of forced entry. The doors were locked and the windows were completely intact. Nothing outside suggested that anyone had broken into the property. Still, officers carefully entered the home to check on the victims. Inside the house, everything looked strangely normal. The living room was neat, and expensive electronics were still in place. Wallets, jewelry, and other valuables were untouched. Nothing had been ransacked. But when officers reached the second floor, they discovered a devastating scene in the bedroom. On the bed lay 33-year-old Caitlin Speck. She was unresponsive and had suffered fatal gunshot wounds. At the foot of the bed, on a rug where she often rested, was the couple's golden Labrador, Bailey May. The dog had also been shot and killed. Matthew Speck was found inside the home with blood on his clothing and several cuts on his arms and stomach. He told officers that he had tried to fight the intruders but had been wounded during the struggle. According to him, the attackers escaped just moments before police arrived. At first glance, the story sounded like a tragic home invasion. But as investigators began examining the scene more closely, they noticed several details that didn't match Matthew's account. The most important issue was the lack of forced entry. Every door and window in the house was secure. The front door had been locked from the inside with a deadbolt and latch. If intruders had entered the home, investigators needed to determine how they had managed to get in and leave without damaging anything. Inside the house, the evidence raised even more questions. There were no signs of a violent struggle. The floors were clean, and there were no footprints or dirt trails that would suggest strangers had moved through the home. Valuables remained untouched throughout the house, which was unusual for a robbery. As forensic experts continued analyzing the scene, they began focusing on Matthew's injuries. He had several cuts on his forearms and abdomen, but medical professionals quickly noticed something unusual. The wounds were shallow and clean, with smooth edges. They didn't resemble injuries typically seen during a violent attack. Normally, when someone fights off an armed attacker, defensive wounds appear on the hands or palms as the victim tries to block or grab the weapon. But Matthew had no such injuries. Instead, the cuts appeared in places that could easily be reached by the person himself. Experts began to suspect the wounds might have been self-inflicted. Investigators also examined the blood patterns on Matthew's clothing. The stains suggested that he had been standing still when the injuries occurred. In a chaotic fight, blood usually appears scattered and uneven due to movement. But the pattern here looked controlled and consistent. At the same time, detectives started looking into Matthew and Caitlin's relationship. Caitlin Speck was known by friends and family as a creative and hardworking person. She worked as a designer and often spent her days working from home. She loved her house in Eagle Landing and was even planning major renovations to improve the property. Her golden Labrador, Bailey May, was always by her side. Friends described Caitlin as someone who enjoyed a quiet and peaceful life. But in the years before the incident, some close friends had noticed changes in her marriage. According to people who knew the couple, Matthew had become increasingly distant. He was spending more time away from home, and the relationship appeared to be under strain. As investigators continued digging into Matthew's life, they discovered another important detail. He had recently reconnected with an ex-girlfriend. Messages between them suggested that Matthew wanted to start a new life with her. Detectives also uncovered financial concerns that may have played a role. The couple owned their home together, and a divorce could have forced Matthew to divide assets or sell the property. According to one of his co-workers, Matthew had previously asked questions about what would happen to shared property if a spouse unexpectedly passed away. This information gave investigators a possible motive. Meanwhile, forensic teams examined digital evidence from Matthew's phone and computer. What they found became a critical turning point in the case. In the days leading up to the shooting, Matthew had searched for disturbing topics online. His browser history included searches about toxic substances, staging crime scenes, and ways to make a murder appear like a robbery. These searches took place shortly before the night Caitlin was killed. When detectives questioned Matthew again, his story began to fall apart. Details about the supposed intruders kept changing. He struggled to describe them clearly, and his timeline of events didn't match the physical evidence. Eventually, investigators concluded that there had never been any intruders in the house. Based on forensic evidence, detectives reconstructed what likely happened that night. According to their findings, Caitlin was asleep in bed when Matthew shot her. The couple's dog, Bailey May, was also shot shortly afterward. Investigators believe the dog was killed to prevent barking or drawing attention. Afterward, Matthew attempted to stage the scene to make it look like a home invasion. He then inflicted cuts on himself to support his story before calling 911. Matthew Speck was arrested and charged with Caitlin's murder, as well as cruelty toward an animal and firearm offenses.
A thorough investigation by the Hanahan Police Department, which included forensic evidence, witness statements, and a 5-hour interview with Speck, led to his arrest.
The case eventually went to trial in Berkeley County, South Carolina. During the trial, prosecutors presented forensic evidence, digital records, and witness testimony that pointed to a carefully planned crime. Experts explained to the jury why Matthew's injuries were inconsistent with a violent attack and how the digital searches suggested planning before the incident. After hearing several days of testimony, the jury reached a verdict. Matthew Speck was found guilty of murdering his wife, Caitlin Speck. He was also convicted of killing the family dog, Bailey May, and of firearm-related charges.
2020 shooting in Hanahan where he killed his wife. The man, Matthew Garrett Speck, was found guilty of murder, ill treatment of animals, and possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime.
The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Under state law, he would also be unable to benefit financially from the crime.
Speck was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murder charge and 5 years each for the ill treatment of an animal and possession of a weapon during a violent crime, to be served concurrently.
The home that had been central to the case was transferred to Caitlin's family. The case left a lasting impact on the Hanahan community. What first appeared to be a terrifying home invasion turned out to be a calculated crime committed by someone inside the home. For investigators, the case also highlighted the role of modern forensic science and digital evidence. In the end, it wasn't just witness statements that revealed the truth. It was the combination of forensic analysis, online activity, and careful investigative work. Today, Caitlin Speck and her loyal dog Bailey May are remembered by family and friends who continue to honor their lives. And the case remains a reminder that even the most carefully planned crimes can leave behind evidence that eventually reveals the truth.